folks. Welcome to part 2 of my interview with Charlie McGrath from wideawakenews.com. If you heard the first part, then I don't really need to do much of an introduction. The only thing I want to mention is the current special that we have with buyemergencyfoods.com. You can get 10% off your entire order. That includes free shipping if you use the coupon code at checkout TPP. That's Tango Papa Papa, the 3 letters TPP. Now, this is only for the next couple weeks, which means from now until September 29th, 2012. You need to jump on this because it's only for a very short period of time. Also, if you call them at 1-888-543-7345, you can customize your buckets, so you can kind of pick and choose what you want and still get the 10% discount if you mention TPP when you check out, or mention, the Preparedness podcast. That's where you heard it. So now's a great time to buy. If you've been kind of holding off and thinking that I should do it, now's the time to do it. And now, part 2 of my interview with Charlie McGrath of wideawakenews.com. Well, you know what, Charlie, I wanted to ask you about about GMO and stuff, but before that, I wanted to see if you could give us like a thumbnail overview of what you see happening and maybe approximately when you see it happening for the economy.
Oh, that's a great question, and you know what, I wish I knew. I think I know what the overall agenda is, which is enter us. We've seen governed by crisis now for going on solid 5 years, not only here but around the world. And the end goal they've been stating all this time is global financial governance. The former head of the ECB, Jean-Claude Trichet, that was his mantra before Mario Draghi got in there, is we need global financial governance. I truly believe we're going to get through this election. I think Obama is going to be reelected. I know there's a lot of hype for Romney now, but again, I don't think it matters. I think we're going to go into a severe crisis, financial crisis across this planet soon after November. And we're going to see a push, again, global governance by crisis, a push to consolidate global debt like we see going on in Europe right now, trying to get everybody under one umbrella of the ECB. We're going to have to do this across oceans and around the world. I mean, everybody who listens to any media at all, mainstream or alternative, has heard about how we're a global economy and whatever happens in Europe affects us here. Well, it has been built that way, orchestrated that way. And so when Europe goes down, naturally America will go down, will suffer big. A simple adjustment of the debt of Greece, amounted to $2 billion loss for MF Global. Shut that company down. If you imagine a sovereign debt write down across the 500 million people of the continent of Europe, it's a global game changer. So, that's really broad overview, but I think the plan is really simple. Enslave as many people on this planet as you can with a weapon that is insidious because you don't see it coming. It doesn't make a noise, but it hits, and it hits hard, and it's permanent, and that weapon is debt. We will see more debt being issued, more freedom being taken, and more power given to fewer and fewer people. And I believe that starts. There's some people that think October, next month, we're going to have October surprise, and it's going to start then. It could. I don't think so. I think we're going to get through the elections. We're going to get a paid spokesman as president. We're going to go to war with Iran. We're going to provide a no-fly zone in Syria. We're going to see a debt crisis unlike anything we've seen now. And the solution is going to be more power into the hands of fewer people and less freedom for you. And in order to drive that agenda, they'll use the debt, but they'll also use something called a malleable populace, which is a populace that's freaking out because they can't get food, they can't get, they can't find any jobs, and the food that they do find is skyrocketing. The fuel that they do find is skyrocketing, and you'll have a nation of people who are just more than willing to kowtow, to bow down and take whatever the elite tell them to do. And again, I don't want to be anywhere near major metropolitan areas when we start to see an escalation of the civil unrest, because we already see civil unrest. It's here now. I know the mainstream doesn't like to cover it, like when they have the election or when they have the convention down in Orlando or in Tampa, rather. And the cameras are certainly not on the protesters, the people looking for a redress of their grievances. But, there's a reason why all these agencies are stocking up on 40 caliber ammunition. There's a reason why all these security laws have been put into place over the last decade. There's a reason why the TSA is expanding from airports out to highways, into bus terminals, onto bridges. It is to control a populace that is freaking out. And so freaking out is in our future, Rob. And I don't know if it's a year. I don't know if it's in 2 months, but it's, I believe, inevitable.
Charlie, have you heard of a book called The Fourth Turning?
No, I haven't.
I forget who it is. I should have pulled it up while you were talking. But basically, these couple
What's the name of it?
Pretty sure it's called The Fourth Turning. I think it's the second book put out by these social scientists or sociologists. And basically what they did is they went and they looked at generational cycles through America back to the Civil War and I think then beyond, or maybe it's the Revolutionary War and beyond. Anyways, what they did is they identified four, they call them turnings. They're basic generational cycles of approximately 20 to 25 years. And I don't remember enough of what they're called, but it's a really interesting, I mean, you can just Google it or go to Wikipedia.
I have it pulled up right now. I see it here on Amazon, yeah.
Yeah, and it's... I've heard these guys talk. Maybe it was on Art Bell or one of those shows a few years ago, actually about like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was really interesting because they identified these four major cycles, and the point I'm getting to here is that the fourth turning is the most chaotic, the most unstable, and if there's going to be violence and revolution and rioting and just this chaotic sort of social uprising, it's going to be in the fourth turning. And I bring it up because according to them, this is something I've been kind of watching in the back of my mind. And when I see like these rioters, these not the anarchists, but the other Wall Streeters.
Yeah. Okay. Occupy.
Yeah. Occupy Now people, they basically, I think, well, this is exactly what they said is if there is, dissidence and the greatest chance of having riot and society being basically upturned is during this fourth turning. And we are like in the fifth or sixth year of the fourth turning. And it's a period that lasts approximately 20 to 25 years. I think on average it's like 22 years. And so when you look at this data, and me as a prepper, I always try to look to the future and try to map out what can happen. And it doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter if it's a global conspiracy. It doesn't matter if it's a banker conspiracy. It doesn't matter if it just happens to be a coincidence of events. The point is that it affects me and my family, and I need to prepare for it. And so looking forward, I'm looking for all these indicators, I'm looking for these flags, I'm looking for underlying reasons, and there is a generational cycle that is a foundational point. The people who are alive today they grew up because of their parents, and their parents learned their ethics from their grandparents and et cetera. And so I thought it was always interesting, and I'm hoping it was wrong, but it seems every year things get worse. We get more chaos. We get more instability. We get more people who are getting fed up because, the Occupy Now, they're more left-winging and stuff like that, and I dismissed them right off. But, as more time goes on with the bankers and the economy and stuff, you start to look at these people a little bit harder and go, maybe they're not totally wrong. And it's not whether they're right or wrong. It's the point is I don't really ever see myself.
Climate, right?
Yeah.
This is the climate. And
this is it.
Well, and I've talked about the Occupy. I've had Occupy folk on the radio program, and I've talked about it in length in videos. And here's my take on it. You can go back to the early 90s when there were people like you saying, look, this is coming. Get ready for it. But let's not do that. Let's just go back till 2007, when the Tea Party came on the scene. People were out protesting. This was when George W. Bush was president. And I remember protesting against the $600 checks, the first stimulus, the pre-stimulus that came out, these $600 checks. And what you had there is you had a group of people that saw what was happening in their country. You know, some of this had to do with the loss of freedom because of Patriot Act and things like that. But a lot of us were out there because we saw a government that was completely, totally out of control, spreading empire around the world, spending money that we don't have, throwing us further and further into debt. And it didn't matter if it was a so-called conservative or so-called liberal in office, government kept getting bigger and is still getting bigger and bigger. So you had folks that were looking to the future saying this is not sustainable and we're going to end up in a tyrannical Stasi police state. So that's what we were doing. We were looking at what was coming. Fast forward 3-4 years, the collapse of 2008, the expansion of the sovereign debt almost doubling in that amount of time, a bunch of corporate special interests being bailed out and given even more power. Then you have the people who didn't see it coming. You know, these are the occupiers. These are the ones who are feeling the effects. These are the 80% of the kids who graduated in 2011 from college who ended up moving back home because there was no jobs. These are the ones that are on 2 years unemployment. These are the ones that are, you know, one of the million foreclosed on a year. These folks are now in the streets because they are living the conditions that a lot of people saw coming. So my point is this: there's always going to be somebody that looks really, really pretty in front of a camera, a guy or a gal looking like $1 million, telling you everything's okay. And those people that are ticked off in the streets, they're a blank. Fill it in. They're a hippie. They're a neo-Nazi. They're a right-wing extremist. They're a liberal bleeding heart. They're going to give it a moniker so that some people will build animosity against them and dismiss it. But you cannot dismiss the frustration that is not only happening in this country, but around the world. It's frustration because of the situation we are in right now. And I haven't read this book yet, but I agree with your summation, which is it is bad, but it promises to get a whole lot worse. And, I think it's why, this is why I'm sitting here on a Sunday talking with you on your podcast. Not because, I'm looking to get a bunch of interviews and stuff. I truly care if my neighbor has emergency prep in his house. I want him to, so he's not knocking on my door, so he's not bothering my loved ones, and we can both be bugged in if that be the case. We can both take care of ourselves for an extended period of time when crisis hits, man-made or otherwise.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that I keep trying to push and get people to understand, whether they're preppers or non-preppers, is, the more people that are prepared to withstand whatever happens. It could be a regional power outage like we've had in Canada, New York, and San Diego. It could be a snowstorm. It could be a flood. It could be a terrorist attack that takes out the power grid because of an EMP, or it could be a natural event like a CME from the sun doing the same thing.
Right.
It could be the collapse of the dollar where it's worthless, or it could be something like the countries who want oil say, you know what, we're not dealing in dollars anymore. We're going to skip that. And
funny, everything you mentioned there, except for maybe, I guess. The mass coronal ejection, that's happened. Toronto lost power for... Yes. So that's occurred. But everything else you just mentioned is recent news, right? That has all happened. There's countries that don't want to trade in our dollar anymore.
Yes.
There's strife everywhere. There's food prices going up. There's food shortages. Look, if people don't see it, seriously, and I'm sure your podcast gets emailed to a lot of people, so hopefully this message is getting to people who are not, we're not singing to the choir. But if they don't see it now, well, they need to be shaken out of their faulty reality and understand that, man, tough times are coming.
Right. And, I think a lot of people are seeing that. Like I said, I think preppers are some of the smartest bears in the woods because they're looking at what's happening, and they're looking beyond what the TV is telling them what to believe, and they're going, nope, something's not right here. No, we've got these issues, and let's hope it doesn't happen, but you know what? I'm going to prepare just in case. And, we've got all these things. And, just to bridge to the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, over the past few years, we've seen a lot of issues with GMO food.
Right.
And I never heard of it, I think, until maybe 2 years ago. And I thought I was really behind the times because suddenly everybody's talking about GMO. I'm like, is this a new car company? I don't understand. And yeah, it could be. But it seems like now, see, I used to work for DeKalb Genetics way back in the day, and they did genetic corn and stuff. And even back then, I'm like, oh, sure, that sounds good. Yeah, it'll grow when there's drought. Awesome. But it seems the more we learn about this GMO stuff, it's bad juju. I mean, I read a story yesterday. Hungary kicked Monsanto out of the country, and they plowed under 1,000 acres of GMO corn. I told my wife that. She's like, yes, because
there's no faster way to put yourself in the position of ultimate power and authority than control a food supply. And, as far as the health aspect of it, I have experts on the program to talk about it. I'm certainly not an expert in the health issues, but I understand, the thought process behind these big corporate interests. Control it from the second it's germinated to the second it's on your table, and you have a very, very broad base of power and control at that point, and you influence Washington with your cash, and you get legislation passed to benefit you. This is how farmers across this country are now trapped, right? They got to buy the seed from a corporate interest. If they try to get it elsewhere and one blows onto their land, they're going to get sued out of existence. And then if you look at the geopolitical ramification of it, there's a lot of hype on the red team about illegal immigrants flowing in. You're in Arizona, so you probably hear it all the time.
Yep.
Immigrants coming into this country. Well, if we look at just genetically modified corn, right, and we're growing it, we're subsidizing it here. Monsanto is getting a big fat paycheck from the government for this subsidizing of the corn crop. It's killing the corn crop, the corn business, the export business out of Mexico, creating poverty down there. So we see a big flood of what were farmers coming across because there's nothing to do down there because they can't sell their corn on the global market because there's a subsidized genetically modified product coming out of the United States that's cheaper than what they can do in Mexico. And so you create all this turmoil in the complete food chain and in the economic chain. And, it is a bad thing. It's so bad that I think the end goal is to integrate this power structure. Right? You have corporate special interests greasing Wall Street. Greasing Washington, D.C. You have Washington, D.C. Writing legislation that is solely benefiting these guys. And at the end of the day, those two collaborate, in this quasi-corporate government fascist state to control the populace because they control your food supply or your fuel supply or, fill in the blank. Everything's going to be controlled by less and less people. No more are we going to have the local farmers growing food to supply food to that region. Not that we have that now, but if we can make it illegal, right? You can't have anything growing in your field unless it comes from Monsanto or whoever the corporation may be. And guess what? You can't even take seeds out of that product. You got to keep buying them over and over again. You have control over the population. And I mean, that's one thing that really, really impressed me talking to Chris with the Legacy Premium brand. Their line of freeze-dried food is they took the advice of, they went and asked questions saying, what do people want in their emergency preparedness in their freeze-dried food? And, no GMO, as you said, it's very popular now. And they did it. I mean, by the end of next month, their line will be GMO free. And, my hat's off to them for being that forward-looking.
Yeah, that's one of the things Chris was telling us about the same thing. And I'm like, that's awesome. I think that's going to be one of the great perks of, well, put it this way, you can buy food storage and know that it's GMO free because I think in addition to the controlling factor, which, folks, I know sometimes this sounds a little bit wacky and way out there, but if you follow the dots, if you do your own research, unfortunately, this stuff just makes too much sense to discount. You just can't turn your cheek and say, "Oh, that's not it." As I've mentioned, back in the mid '90s, a group of us were trying to let people know of what's happening, and now today it's just worse.
And on every level.
On every level. I mean, the inflation. I bought silver back in. I think it was the late 80s, early 90s. It was $4 an ounce.
Yeah.
I still have that silver, and silver is what, almost 30 or right around $30 an ounce.
I think we're closer to 33 right now.
Yeah, 33.67 I think is what it closed on Friday. Gosh, that's almost $30 an ounce profit. But you know what? It's not profit, because if I was to sell that gold, what I could buy for $4 or $5 back when I bought the silver now costs me about $28 to $35 now. Now, it may be a little bit cheaper because it's made in China and it's a piece of junk, or it's got tons of lead in it or something like that. But the point is that I didn't really make money. I've only preserved my wealth, and that's exactly how I look at things today. It's getting worse. And when I look at my kids, I'm like, man, I don't know where things are going to end up, but I have a feeling that we're not going to get there without some hard times. And when you look at the global economy and you look at the state of our food, we got all this problems with food production right now. I think I heard that the United States isn't going to be exporting any corn this year,
right?
Which is
50% of the crop right now is either poor or very poor condition. I
think it's been years or decades since that's happened. And, you may think, oh, well, that's fine. Well, we'll have enough for us. We don't need. Yeah, but that puts on global stresses in the food market elsewhere. I mean, wars happen because of food and water. I mean, most of the wars throughout history are over food and water. So, and religion. But I mean, if you take religion out of it and you look at why people go to war, thousands of years ago, that's why.
That's a great point. And that's why if you could take a slice of the pie, one little segment, you're looking at the availability of food commodities, and just looking at that slice of the pie gives you all the reason in the world why it would pay to be a prepper. Just looking at the supply of the commodities you need to sustain calories in your body, the supply of food commodities. But if you take that slice and you widen it, you talk about war. What happens if, let's say, for instance, Romney gets in and we decide we're going to war with Iran. They shut down the Straits of Hormuz. All of a sudden, diesel is, instead of $4 a gallon, it's $12 a gallon. That's very, very feasible.
It's a very real possibility.
Absolutely. Then the 1,500 miles the food drove to your grocery store suddenly is 4 times more to get it there. Well, that isn't just going to be absorbed by a trucking company. That isn't going to be absorbed, by an oil company. That's going to be absorbed by you. So if you're sitting there and your average, the average household's lost $4,000 in income over the last couple of years, and all of a sudden you are looking at a fuel bill, or the fuel bill for your produce to get to your store is 4 times as much. You're in a crisis situation. All of a sudden, your budget doesn't put food on your table.
Well, it's not just food though. Right. It's easy to say, oh, sure, all right, it'll cost me 3 times as much to get to work. Yeah, it's a problem, but I could probably suffer that. But all the items in Walmart and the big box retailers,
yep,
all the food that's in your grocery stores, you know what? I would venture to say that if gas prices were to double overnight, within a matter of probably weeks, if not sooner, half the food in your grocery store wouldn't be there. Because
It'd be overnight. I've been in the commodity business for a long, long time, and when you see those kind of increases, it isn't, well, we'll wait until we see the increases in our receipts, in our fuel costs. It's immediately transferred to whatever product you're selling. So, and Wall Street would love it. They would love it because war is good for the stock market, but the people, again, just another hidden tax. you'd end up paying.
Right. Well, I remember when we had a gas pipeline from California break here, and the truckers would stop running because the gas was so expensive locally. And then we had that rise a few years ago, 2009, I think it was. Mm-hmm. They were parking their rigs on the side of the street because it was too expensive to run them. Now, you're probably right. It may happen overnight, but the point I was trying to make was, folks, if you like having strawberries in non-season, they come from someplace else, like South America or Mexico or overseas or something. You're not going to have that type of produce available, and so when that produce isn't available, what are you gonna do? You're gonna eat whatever is available. Well, if you had food storage, you could say, well, I still have freeze-dried strawberries, or I have this meal or something. You can allow yourself to have those options to bridge those gaps until another opportunity comes up, or maybe the next season comes up.
You give yourself the ability not to have to go out your door in a situation where you do not want to go out your door. I got a question for you, though, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Because your program is all about preparedness, and I get this all the time. How much should I prepare for? How long a period of time? And before you tell me, I'm going to tell you what I've done. I honestly, I don't think we're going to Mad Max. I don't. There's a lot of people that look at this as some kind of romantic notion that everything's going to be wiped away and we're going to be living in the zombie apocalypse. And if that comes, I hope that the Yellowstone caldera, which I'm 90 miles away from, goes, so I can just be done, because I don't want to live in that.
Right.
I don't want to live in a lawless society. But I'm not a fool. I understand that there's going to be crisis, there's going to be chaos, there's going to be times where I don't want to leave the house, and I always want to protect my ability to put food into me and my son. So I picked a number years ago which was 6 months. I want 6 months worth of water. I want 6 months worth of calories in my domicile, so that if it all hits the fan, I at least know that, okay, everything else is going crazy, falling apart. I can protect my family. I have the means to protect myself. I have the means to protect what property I have, and I have 6 months worth of the ability to keep alive. Well, what do you recommend? What are you recommending to folks?
It's hard to make a specific recommendation because everybody has a different plan, so to speak, or they should. So, for example, you're in Montana. You're in a good state. Right. Somebody who is in an urban area like Chicago or Phoenix or LA or Miami or New York, they should not have a plan of sheltering in place for too long. So they may only need, say, a couple months of food in their home, but they need a plan to evacuate to, say, a retreat area, and that should have more food there. So it depends also on what you're storing. If you're storing pantry food, the food that you eat every day, the stuff you get at the grocery store, which you should, because that's the easiest to use, it's what you're most used to. Once you get past 4 months, it's really hard to keep that organized because you constantly have to rotate food out. You have to constantly make sure you're not letting food get too old. And so somewhere in 3 to 4 months becomes very difficult. So I would say, somewhere in 1 to 3 months of pantry food is what you should have. And then you should be looking at some intermediary food, such as the legacy stuff, because you can make that fairly quickly. It also is really great for evacuations because you don't have to worry about making food. I mean, if you store wheat, you can make bread, but who wants to make bread while you're evacuating? You're hungry, but you don't have the time to actually, grind the wheat and let it rise and bake it and stuff.
Or bring 500 pounds of canned wet food.
Right, exactly. So the freeze-dried, dehydrated stuff is really good for evacuating or in that period of time where you're going from home to retreat area, because you don't have to spend a lot of time, you don't have to carry a lot of weight with you. But you should also look at bulk food storage. I like things like again, this legacy stuff. It's got a shelf life of 25 years. That means the money I spend on it now doesn't go bad in 5 years, and I don't have to worry about replacing it. It's 25 years. I mean, if I look how old I'm going to be 25 years from now, And if you look at, say, the fourth turning generational cycle, hopefully 25 years from now, things will be much rosier, and these would be novelties. But at least I'll have it, and I can buy it once, and I can know that it's good for a very long period of time. So I like having that type of food stuff. So you can go into the 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. I think if you could afford it, and if you bought the right foods, I think a year's worth of food is a good goal if you're planning on becoming as self-reliant as possible after a collapse sort of thing. So if we have an economic collapse where you're planning on either starting a garden or building out or enlarging your garden, you have to remember, you don't plant a seed and you don't get food next week. It takes months. And that is if it even comes in. So you need to plan appropriately. Your long-term plan says, oh, well, I'm going to have a garden and I'm going to grow my own food. But until that food comes in, you need to have something you can eat. And so you have 6 months. I think 6 months is a good intermediary time frame. And again, it depends on your plan. If you plan on staying at home or right around that area, why not go to a year if you can afford it? Because again, with something that lasts a long period of time, you buy it once and you've got that insurance for a quarter of a century.
Yeah,
I think that, but
if nothing else, if I went from 6 months to a year, if nothing else, I would have, unforeseen, a sister from Alabama showing up, or, a friend or a loved one.
Exactly. That was my next point is, you're planning for you and your son. However, no man is an island unto themselves. So it's going to be really difficult for you to be able to eat while your neighbors or other family members are starving to death. So by having more, it allows you to have that opportunity, that option to be charitable. Now, I'm not saying that you should advertise you have food to give away, but, you can make that decision at that point. It's like, okay, I can do this and without really compromising my safety or my son's safety. Also, I think what's going to happen is, like you said, it's not going to be a Mad Max thing. It's not going to be a collapse where, bam, suddenly, there is nothing left and it's dog-eat-dog world. I think we're going to have periods of up and down. Like we had this recession, it got bad, now it got a little bit better. The next hit, I think, is going to be worse, and I think that it may be months. That doesn't mean you're not going to be able to buy food. That means it might be more expensive. So you can plan your food stores to be as flexible as possible.
Yeah.
Buy fresh meat when it's available. Buy fresh eggs when it's available. Use the money for that. Buy fresh milk, buy fresh cheese when it's available, and use your food storage to make that stuff stretch. Your pasta, your rice. If you have a chili mix or something, you can put that on rice or noodles and stretch that out. And so you'll have the opportunity to, oh, well, things are high today. I'm not going to buy today because I've got food. I don't have to worry about it. But next week when there's a sale, I can take advantage of it because I can make it to next week without any problems.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I think I'm going to take it because I agree. I think we're going to see sharp decline. My hope is we go into, this sounds kind of creepy, but it is my hope we go into a complete and utter collapse economically, and forcing a return to a constitutional republic and constitutional money would be my ultimate goal. And I think the only way that will ever happen is if we do have a complete financial collapse and realize how we got here and who brought us here, and then perp walk these folks and put them in orange jumpsuits and put them away forever.
And that's probably what will happen. If you look at the recession, you had a lot of people that suddenly became very interested in economics.
Right.
Because it was thrown in their face. Suddenly they're without a job. Suddenly they can't afford anything. And they're like, hey, what happened here? How did we get here? And they suddenly got an education on what a lot of other people were trying to let them know sooner. But they, either... Well, see, the middle class is usually too busy working, trying to have a life, trying to have the American dream, and they typically don't pay attention where they should until boom, recession, and it's like, oh, what happened? And so I agree. I have a feeling that we're not going to be able to restore our Constitution and the government the way it should be until something catastrophic happens. And I don't like thinking about it, and I don't really want to see that happen. But I really don't know if it's going to happen any other way.
Well, return to a constitutional republic, I don't think there is any other way. I mean, I think we need to have a purging of all this fraudulent debt, realize that it's fiat to begin with, and then hold accountable the people who brought us here, and then not rewrite anything. We're fortunate in one respect, which is we have all the tools that we need. Right? We have a constitution; it mandates who should create money and determine the value of it. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to get special interest out of the way.
Yeah, that's true. Charlie, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking with you and learning some new things that I hadn't been following that I should. Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave for the listeners?
I'm hoping I can get you on the radio program, and I would just say again, I'm grateful for Chris and Chris at bioemergencyfoods.com for hooking this interview up. And I know we talked a lot of topics, and it just seemed like we were talking politics, geopolitics, and prep. But guys, the message I want to deliver is get over there, bioemergencyfoods.com. Do 10 ounces of silver gets you 60 days worth of calories for you. If you have a loved one, that's a month. For $260, you have a month worth of calories for you and a loved one. And I mean, there's absolutely no better time than right now, especially talking about, everything we covered about the potential for that $260 for 180 serving entree bucket could very easily be $500 this time next year. If that's on the best case scenario, that's if we turn on the printing presses. So visit the folks over there, bioemergencyfoods.com. They do a great job. They care about their customers, and they are preppers.
Well, and it's important to note that, folks, this isn't something you should take a long time. Whatever it is you want to do, you need to do it as soon as possible, because once things start rolling, if this economic collapse happens Monday or Friday, I mean, they love to do things on Friday because it's a low news cycle. Nobody's paying attention. I mean, think about what happened back in the recession. It happens fast. If suddenly gas doubles overnight and there's no food in the grocery store, it's too late. You can't order and think UPS is going to deliver next week. Once the whip is cracked, so to speak, it's done. You need to be prepared before that event. That's what being prepared is looking ahead and going, okay, I know this sounds weird, but I need to do this. I'm going to get food. I'm going to get prepared. I'm going to make sure my family is safe, and I'm going to do it long before anything happens, so that when it does happen, you don't have to panic like everybody else.
I agree. Once toothpaste is out of the tube, it's not going back in.
Not yet. No, it isn't. All right, Charlie. Hey, I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to coming on and talking prep with you and your listeners.
All right, man. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank Charlie for coming on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to him as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. I think that it's important to get a different perspective now and then, and that's why I like to have other people on the podcast when possible. Okay, that wraps up this podcast and this interview. So until next time, folks, enjoy life and stay safe.